Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and today I am doing some spring cleanup of my fall list. This is being recorded on Memorial Day 2019 for reference, and I wanted to get this done. I probably have to do a cleanup, frankly, between the follow list on my Steam account and my wish list every 6 months. That's probably about where it is. And the reason for that is, I should explain, that every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I play Hearthstone and talk about video game news. Part of talking about video game news is looking at almost every single game that comes out on Steam. Sometimes I miss a few. Sometimes I've been able to figure out that the games sometimes are not even worth looking at. But if a game is interesting enough, but not so amazing that it immediately has either relevancy or appeal, which are pretty much the two factors that I sort by, I'll often just put it on the follow list and say I'll give it 6 months, I'll give it maybe even a year. At this point, I'm going to be looking at games that came out before January 1st, 2019, so it's been 6 months since then. We're trying to see if these games will have ratings that would make them then have somebody say something nice about it, that it actually is a good game, because it certainly is possible that something might be visually appealing or even in gameplay mechanic appealing, but when people actually purchase it and put their reviews on it, when this small number of people that actually do review games point out that there's a problem, well, then it's probably not worth me putting it on the wish list and thus planning to eventually purchase that game and cover it on YouTube. The main thing here is we do want to find hidden gems, but we don't want to dig so deep at the bottom of the barrel that I'm purchasing hundreds of dollars worth of irrelevant or bad games. Relevancy is the other thing, certainly, because while a hidden gem probably won't have much relevancy unless it has a story behind it, like it's a student project or something, it would then have the visual appeal. On the other hand, there might be a game that has a lot of appeal, whether visual or gameplay or some other appeal, but then has a lot of relevancy. So there is a narrow pathway where I might even play a game knowing it's bad if it's relevant. In fact, quite a few AAA games from big publishers and developers I think fall down that category, where they're not very good, not really worth playing, but they have relevancy because a lot of people play them and then they have a historical impact. So we're just looking at the follow list, and we're going to go down this list. I have a tab open, or in the process, quite actually, of opening up right now for each of the games. Then, or most of these games. Some of these games came out after the January 1st, so they're still too new, and it would be unfair, particularly if the game only came out a week or two ago and nobody's found it. Now, how anybody is going to find a game on Steam is questionable, but we have two goals that we're going to try to do here. Is we're either going to add it to the wish list saying it's good enough, or we're going to remove it from the wish list, remove it from the follow list and stop following it, and then put it back in the category as basically any other game on Steam that you just really don't have a lot of interest in. That I think will mostly be done by me copying and pasting the titles and doing all the actual work later, because Steam just does not want to keep me logged in, and we very possibly may get to a point where it will say the tab is suspended because of a plugin that suspends tabs to save RAM. I have disabled that right now, and it is using over 75% of my 16 gigabytes of RAM. So we have a ton of pages, as you can see. We're going to be looking at roughly 90% of all of these games because this is the first cleanup. I also want to point out that the Steam spring cleaning event is happening right now. They're not really putting many games on sale, but there is a small collection of games that you can play for free this weekend. And if you play some of the older games in your library, your backlog, then they will give you a little reward and a badge for that. So you should check that out and follow the instructions to do that. Although, if you're just seeing this live, then you've only got a couple days, and I don't think you'd be able to catch up completely. But better late than never. Because some of the games on the follow list are adult in nature, and particularly over the course of this last year, Steam has had some growing pains. Steam went from a storefront that basically had no adult, romance style games, sex games, let's just call them what they are. A couple years ago, they went from having basically none or very, very small games that were approved to saying everything's okay, to saying everything's okay except for if they're in a schoolgirl uniform, which knocks out almost half, if not more, all of the Japanese adult games, because that's just like college kids and high school kids both wear schoolgirl outfits in Japan. To now they've finally seem to fallen very, very much without explaining the rules or regulations. They seem to fallen pretty open-minded and letting almost everything in. I haven't heard anybody complain about not being allowed to place their game on Steam for several months now. It wrapped up early in 2019. Meanwhile, PlayStation 4 is going going the opposite direction right now. But heck, 6 months from now, it may be exactly opposite again. But because of that, I've implemented a plugin on my video. So if we do come into a game, I will come over here and move the mouse to the left of the screen, and it will blur it, and then I can still read and describe it, and then I can come over to the far right of the screen with the mouse cursor, and it will unblur it. I was going to tie it into a shortcut key, so every time I switched the tab using Control Tab in Chrome, because this is just Chrome browser, it would automatically blur. But frankly, there's probably only 5 games on the wish list, or on the follow list, that are that adult in nature. And if Steam kind of retroactively looked at some of those games and said, look, your game can be 100% uncensored when they sell the product, but the screenshots and the videos you put on there need to be family friendly still, I think that's perfectly fair. I think that's, for the most part, how most storefronts are wanting that kind of content to be sold. Family friendly on the storefront. Now, if you go to Nutaku, which is a separate video game storefront specifically built around adult games, their storefront is not censored. But then again, Nutaku does not sell anything but adult games, and frankly, most of their games are not very good. Well, frankly, most adult games are not very good. But that's going to be the only real mine field here. Otherwise, this is just going to be a slow process where we might run into a point where tabs stop loading, so I might have to break up the recording. We might run into a point where it says access denied because I've opened so many web pages from Steam, which is what it tends to do. Or we just might run into a point where it takes particularly long. This is a much longer process than what I do on average every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Usually I'm pretty flippant and pretty loose with my determination on whether it makes it to the follow list or not, because I know I'm going to come back and think about it. There is also a scenario here that is very possible where I will put a game from the follow list to the wish list. 6 months from now, I'll do a wish list cleanup, and when I do the wish list cleanup, I might put that game back on the follow list. That might happen. It's not super likely to happen because I assume that every 6 months my standards are going up a little bit more and I'm being a little bit more critical, just on the fact that I am seeing more and more bad looking games and getting more and more frustrated with them. One of the sad truths, unfortunately, is that bad games are also getting a lot better looking. So it's a lot easier these days to buy a bunch of 3D models and Unity assets and make a Unity asset flip game that looks like it actually is something when it really isn't. And then I will finish up before we start here with saying that down in the description is a way to friend me on Steam. The Steam Summer Sale is coming out. That is another good reason to do this cleanup right now. I ask people to support me by either gifting me a gift card from Steam. You can do that after friending me on Steam, or you can gift me a game off my wishlist or just any kind of game you'd like to see me cover. That's why I maintain the wishlist in part. And so the Summer Sale is coming soon. So I'll just take a drink of water and we will begin with the first game. So let's point out what we're looking for. In general, I'm looking for a low effort name. Sorry, blurred it. I knew I moved that too far. I'm looking for a low effort name. I would say 103 is not a low effort name. It's pretty unique, or at least somewhat unique. I'm looking for a low effort thumbnail here. That's pretty unique too. I'm looking at the tags. If it's like a visual novels in particular, I may be pretty picky on. I'm looking to see if it's mostly positive and if it has over 20 reviews. Or, if it has less than 20 reviews, did it come out before, did it come out before January 1st, 2019? A lot of the games we will see will just simply have only 5 reviews, and even if they're positive, I may just have to at that point determine it's never caught any kind of following. So it might be a hidden gem, but it's kind of has to stay a hidden gem because my budget really can't afford to risk buying a game like that. What we won't be doing is looking at the developer or the publisher to see if there might be a name behind it, and we won't be watching the trailer video or really flipping too much through the screenshots. Also, price doesn't really matter as long as the price isn't completely unreasonable, and maybe updates might matter. Language and whether it has full audio might matter, but we probably won't be reading the description because that would take way too long. We might keep an eye on the achievements if it gets down to that point. And if we really are still trying to make a decision at this point, then we would come down here and see if we could load the reviews. But I imagine none of the reviews will actually load. In fact, anything that's going to try to load is probably going to fail miserably for the entirety of the stream. But I don't really have to pick here. I'm going to take this and copy it and then add it to a notepad over here, so I know to add this to the wish list because this has satisfied as a game. I don't really know what this game is, but I'm pretty sure it's just a uniquely animated horror game adventure, probably point and click adventure. It's probably short, it's probably simplistic. It certainly didn't get any mainstream coverage when it came out in the middle of like 4 days before Christmas. It clearly was released at the wrong time. But yeah, particularly if it was a horror game, like why either you make October, either you make October 25th, or you just delay your game for a whole nother year, or at least don't put it out in November, December. Those months are dead as far as games. You've missed, by the time you release a game in December, you've missed also Black Friday sales. So released at the wrong time, and you can see it suffered from that. But this game does look good enough to be put on the wish list. Now, most of these games are just going to be games that are low tier games on the wish list. My wish list is sort of sorted, where I would say of the, I think there's 1,000, maybe 2,000 games on the wish list. The top 100 are like top tier games that I absolutely want to buy and play and cover on my YouTube games. The rest are, yeah, if I got them cheap, if I bought them on a humble bundle, which often you can get games that way and support a charity at the same time, that would be fine. They're of a good enough quality to deserve coverage, but that doesn't mean they're half to buys or the top tier AAA games. Next we have 2084, which, if any of the screenshots loaded, which I unfortunately think this is going to be the case with everything, we would be seeing some screenshots of first-person shooter games. And so this image, this image, this image, this image, and this image, I can tell all have a gun in front of them and they're showing off some form of the background. This is 75% positive with 24 reviews, so just barely over that arbitrary 20 line, but it is also early access. So then the thing you have here is an early access game, so what that means is it needs to just stay on the wish list, because I refuse to play any game that's early access. This came out in early access in December of 2018 again, so it's been in early access for 6 months. It also came out of a 72-hour game jam, which tells you there's a it's probably not gonna ever be finished. So the weirdness with this case is early access games supersede everything, which means it stays on the wish list, which means I just have to then hit Control W and close the tab, because no decision can be made at this point. Next we have 2236 AD, and this seems to be tagged with nudity and sexual content, so let me go blurry for a second and see if any of these images look like they would have any nudity in them. I don't think that anything that would be shown is going to be unfriendly for Steam or for YouTube. So it's a sci-fi casual indie game. Almost certainly this is a visual novel, because most of these games are. This reminds me of an anime called Serial Experiments Lane from the early 80s, I believe, and the animation style kind of looks like that. So I think for the most part this goes to the wish list, but also these adult games go to the wish list kind of for a different reason. quite frankly, adult games until there is a streaming service out there where I could play adult games, or until I was making, well, any money on my YouTube channel, but specifically enough money to hire an editor. Covering an adult game is difficult, to say the least. It depends very much on how many scenes and how many episodes there are. If the game has nudity in it completely the whole time, then that's a problem, and too much to censor out. It would make very little sense if you tried to, for several hours, do a video that looked like this. But a lot of games, also, there's barely 5 minutes of nudity in it, and it gets tagged with nudity, so you just kind of don't know until you play. That being said, you have games like this, and this is fuzzy just because it's fuzzy. Here we have Seven Scarlet, rated positively. It's a visual novel and an tagged otome. Otome means young maiden game. So in Japan they have several different categories of games that they are targeting different audiences. So an otome game is, for the most part, focused towards a 16, 17, 18-year-old woman, girl, which would be right in line for a lot of visual novels. It tends to have a major focus, as you can see here, on male characters, because the player character is usually playing a female character. But it is not unheard of also for it to be homosexual in nature, and the guys might get with the other guys, and the main character might be a guy. This is also a great point to mention. A lot of visual novels have a sci-fi mystery spin on them, also on top of being other kinds of games. So there's visual novels in its basic form means there's just going to be mostly text and very little, if any, other gameplay mechanic. Sometimes, and a lot of times, I'd say about 50%, visual novels do have some kind of dating romance scenario in it. Sometimes there is no real dating mini game in it, or anything you control like that, but there might still be some romance in it. In this one's case, I believe this is more of a murder mystery that you're trying to investigate. It follows the rules. It also has the problem and the good fact of being $29.99. That is really, really expensive for a video game, particularly a visual novel game, which is not much of a game. But if a visual novel is this expensive, that tends to point out that it is a top tier game. So you have 72% of 68 users saying it's good. This came out on March 12th of 2019, so it's been less than 6 months. It's from a developer named Idea Factory that I recognize. So there's no reason not to put this on the wish list. It is worth pointing out, though, that doesn't inherently mean I will be covering visual novels. There might be a time that I go through my wish list and just remove all the visual novels, because that would just be a lot of talking and a lot of reading of what's on screen. Something we failed to look at this game is if it has full audio in English. It doesn't. It just has full audio in Japanese. So I would have to play this game for potentially 30 to 60 hours if it's a 30 or 60 hour game, reading every single line of dialogue out loud, or not reading it out loud and sitting in silence, which would really hurt my voice. JRPGs are in a similar position. There's a lot of JRPGs in my wish list that I'm not sure how many, if any, I will actually cover. I'm still trying to get a list in my head of, do I need to play Final Fantasy games, or should I play Dragon Quest games, or should I find some other kind of JRPG? Should I play a handful of small non-serialized games, or should I go for the serialized games like Final Fantasy? Although in Final Fantasy's case, really, I probably would only want to play like 7 or 13, the 313 games, or I'd probably skip 15 and a lot of the other ones. Fighting games are in the same case. Fighting games are very expensive. I've never really been played fighting games. I don't know if I need to play Street Fighter, or do I go to Mortal Kombat, or do I go to BlazBlue? It's all up in the air until I just make a decision. And inherently, you'll find, even though what I'm doing right now is making decisions, I'm not very good at making decisions. People in general are not. They want to put off decision making as much as possible, and that's a lot what I've done here. Next, we have a game called Seventh Sector. It came out in March of 2019, so very new game, and it's already rated very positively. I don't think we really need to go any further with it. As things are right now, we are stuck with just giving brief impressions of the game and then moving forward, since screenshots won't load. So it's a puzzle platformer, I would guess, if based on the screenshots from what I can tell, and it's rated very positively, so that's good enough. Then say this is going to the wish list, which I don't think I've done a very good job of hedging my bets here, because I was betting that less is another sexual content. So let me check the screenshots for a second. Like I said, there was going to be about 5 of them, but at this rate there's probably more. And for a while there, I was just putting all adult games in the fall list because I was considering it that way, but that's not what the fall list is being used for now. So yeah. Yeah, with the current screenshots not loading up, then we should be fine. So we have 9 episode 1. It's an episodic game. It's rated very positively. A visual novel tagged with sexual content, nudity. What we might see down here is a mature content description, which is part of the growing pains of exactly what's in the game. You'll see the standard, all characters are depicted over the age of 18. This is a stupid argument. I always hate this. These are cartoons, these are drawings. They're as old as the paper and the ink that they were drawn with. So if you drew a picture yesterday, that picture is 2 days old. That's the reality of it. Otherwise, it's a fictional character, and who cares? There's, in my mind, no other possible argument to be made here. But I think Steam likes them to say that. So, the fact that this game is in Chinese tells me that it is also a little bit more popular. You don't spend the extra money to translate something just to Chinese after its original Japanese. You'll spend the extra money usually to do English, because English is the secondary language of a lot of countries in Asia. But if you're making traditional Chinese your third localization translation, that tells me that it's a big deal. Also, this is an episodic game for $19.99 from another well-known publisher, Sekai Project. But yeah, you'll get this description. and it's usually pretty generic. But yeah, that's what you. It still doesn't really help at all as a YouTuber as to whether this is on track or something that I could censor. The thing I would say here is, if I was to try to search any more episodes, it's pretty obvious that there aren't any. So this effectively, by being episodic, is still in early access, and for that reason this game cannot be put on the wish list. It is very possible that in 6 months, it probably has been close to 6 months since this game has come out, it's very possible that the rest of the games don't come out, or they're severely delayed. There's one thing Japanese game developers love to do, it's announce games and then delay it. Next we have A Christmas Carol, and this is probably our first game that's not a visual novel centric game. There'll be a lot of them, don't worry. So A Christmas Carol is a holiday action game with the proceeds going to charity. That's something you can't believe. Players are engaged in a snowball fight. It's from a self-publisher. It has 3 reviews. It came out after Christmas last year, 4 days after Christmas, so it missed the Christmas element too. And it seems like what we're running into is the first screenshot is now loading. This is a game that should leave the fall list. There's nothing here quality enough to make this go to the wish list. So for me, that just means I leave the tab where it is, and I'll figure that out later. Here we have another visual novel from Sekai Project called A More Beautiful World, a kinetic visual novel. It is early access again, so we don't need to consider it. Just leave it. So we move on to the next game. Next we have a point-and-click adventure game called A Write from the Stars. This is a Phoenix Online publishing game, which tells me it's a student project. So there's reason to put it on the wish list because of that. Let's scroll down. So it's a green light game. Well, maybe it's not a student project. Let's see, if I click like view all, I bet that wouldn't load either. Phoenix Online Publishing may not be the University of Phoenix. Yeah, it isn't. I think this game tricked me on that fact also. Alright. So we have 7 user reviews that probably won't load. And this was a game made in Spain, apparently, according to this. 6 different hours, more than 2 hours of music. And see, the reviews won't load, so we're painted in their corner because of that. Complete 3 paths of wisdom, courage, and spirit in any order. This was a Steam Greenlight game that was greenlit near the very end of Steam Greenlight being a thing. Well, you know what? This game does not look any worse than some of the low tier cheap games. This is a game I definitely would not want to spend $7.50 on it, but if you could get it down to $3.50, I would be okay with it. It has 48 achievements, which makes me kind of question if it's an achievement game, because there definitely are a lot of games out there that try to give you 48, 100, or just one achievement, because Steam also rewards you for having 100% achievement completion. But I think having to make a snap judgment, the time has come. We'll just put this on the wish list, and you know what? In 6 months, this might be one of the games that gets thrown right back down to the follow list as not being high enough quality. Particularly when I'm looking at the wish list and saying, oh no, there's AAA games worth $60, $70, maybe even $80 when all is said and done. This $8 game doesn't match up with that. Here we have a game that is not so much a game as a VR experience. I'm leaving VR games on the follow list because I do not have a VR headset. I do not honestly believe at this point I ever will have a VR headset. This isn't particularly one that should just leave because it has no relevancy. This is a video VR experience that is made and developed and published by the actual Google, as far as I can tell. And even though you have all of the power and might behind Google, they didn't want to support it enough to even get it set more than 17 reviews. So it's just not relevant. It's a free game. Google has several free VR things, and if you bought a VR headset, this would be a pretty good experience for you to have, I imagine, while playing with it. But it's not something that would really be interactive or very interactive. It might have a little bit of interactivity. So that's getting removed. Next we have Aborigines, a small adventure platformer RPG. It is rated 83% of 24 reviews. Now, I want to be careful here that this isn't a troll game, because it is possible that a game would have 20 reviews or so from just trolls saying this is a good game when it really isn't. Looking at this screenshot, I don't see anything interesting here. And frankly, I'm not sure why this would be on my wish list. $3.99 is a little too cheap. There's some other games that are being bundled, which is often what happens for cheap games, as they get bundled, so you buy more of them. This does not look like anything worth actually evaluating. It just looks like a pretty well done student project, quite frankly. If this was your 3rd or 4th year thesis project in computer programming, I would forgive it for looking ugly, because I'd assume that a game programmer is not an artist. But as a complete package, it's just not there. So that's leaving the follow list also. And I think the same is probably going to be said for Above the Fold. It's a newspaper sim where you're editor-in-chief. I like that concept, but in the visuals that are being shown here, it seems like you pretty much are just doing a person's job. And I've come to realize that there are far too many games on Steam where you're doing somebody else's job and they're pretending like that's a game and that's an entertaining thing. This is just not good enough graphics here. And when you look at these screenshots down below, it seems like you're mostly focusing on actually writing the newspaper or selecting, possibly dragging and dropping games. And while this is an early access game, I'm going to just remove it at this point, because this is the other issue. Early access games for 6 months still looks bad. It's been given its chance. It's time for it to be removed. Next we have Accounting Plus, which is probably one of the better VR games out there to play. Let's see, is there anything I need to do with this? Because I can't put it in the wish list because it's VR, and it's VR only. Some of the games I kind of wished they would put a non-VR version in it so you could still play the game. But that doesn't seem like that's the case. Accounting Plus is from Crows, and some of the creators of I forgot the name of the show, the famously popular Cartoon Network late night Adult Swim show. Rick and Morty, yeah, it's some of the creators of Rick and Morty. I think this should leave, frankly. I think I should do some cleanup, and particularly Accounting Plus is probably the first one of the first 5 games you'd be recommended if you got a VR headset, regardless. And yeah, it's lost its relevancy. People think it's popular, and it's not asking really that much for a VR game because there is this premium on VR games. So I don't feel a need to cover it. So I'm going to remove that. Next we have Ace Combat 7 Skies Unknown, which is probably a very odd way to break into the Ace Combat series, but I don't believe that there are any others on Steam. The Ace Combat series is a flying simulator style game, dogfighting, air combat. From what I can tell, the story is pretty crazy and silly, but people seem to like that. It's selling for $60. It came out January 31st. I think it deserves to be on the wish list. Quite frankly, there's kind of not a lot of options as far as flight combat games. Not like the old days. The Microsoft Flight Simulator, while still exists, is less a thing that should be. That would be your go-to choice. So that's, yeah. If I want to play a flight simulator game where you're dogfighting, Ace Combat 7 might be the game to buy. Almost certainly is the game to buy. And probably it is the only flight simulator game to buy. And then if an Ace Combat 8 comes out, then I might consider buying that. But I'm not sure if it really has much of any competition for how much flight simulators and dogfighting games have become a niche. Next we have an Adventure Time game. There is a question, particularly considering how Adventure Time is an older cartoon now, and this game came out in 2016. It becomes questionable why to keep this on the fall list, particularly since it's a VR game. Yeah, I think this also should just be left on the cutting room floor. If I had VR and I was doing more these days to play kids games, I used to play a lot of Lego games and show those off, but quite frankly nowadays I'm not focusing on making or covering kids video games. There's so few of them. This does look like a good game. It's just, in the effort to clean things up, it's old, it's lost its relevancy, and it requires VR, so it can just be removed from the list. Next we have a game called After Hours, which came out December 20th. Groundbreaking research into encrypted on a computer. From A's look through the computer and search the internet to crack encryption in this fully Kickstarter-backed augmented reality video game. Well, if it's an augmented video reality game, that pretty much guarantees that I would have to go off the game and go to a website or something, and who knows if any of that would actually work. This is $2.99, which puts it out very cheaply. The last update on it was January 16th. And it does seem like it's pretty simplistic. 10 achievements might make it an achievement game. I wish these reviews would happen. But After Hours is a remake of a popular Newground game's 128K, a detective game built completely from scratch with all new puzzles for Steam. Visually, it's unappealing. Quite frankly, it's black and white, and it really just feels like has no relevancy now. It's kind of an intriguing idea, but that's all it really has going for it, so that's going to get removed. Let's see. Next we have August. This is blurry, by the way, by default. August Generations of War 0. This is a JRPG series. It's rated positively. It came out in 2014. I believe there are several August games, or Agarest games. Perhaps I'm mispronouncing it. So this is another series that I think deserves to be in consideration on the wish list. If you were going to buy the complete series, you would buy all 4 according to this bundle. So I imagine all 4 of these games are on the wish list back to back. So yeah, this should go to the wish list. I have to almost constantly remind myself how I'm doing everything. Next we have a turn-based August Generations of War game. So yeah, this includes the base pack and the entire game, and yeah, this one's rated mostly positive too, so 2 out of 3 of the games are okay. But the previous game was called August Generations of War 0, so that's probably a predecessor to this game, and this pack does not include that game, so you're not buying the same thing twice, or at least as far as I can tell, you're not buying the same thing twice. But that is definitely part of the reason why I have a wish list in the first place, is because it is very possible to accidentally buy the exact same game or a similar game twice. Now you have I'm gonna just call it Agarest or Agarest Generations of War 2, which would be the sequel, and you can see it's running about 58% positive here, and it looks like they probably moved to a different generation of characters. And so from this, I don't know what you do there. You probably still want to put this on the wish list. If I went through 0 and if I went through the original game, or I played in whatever order is best suggested, probably it's to play Generations of War, then play Generations of 0, then play 2. I might very well burn out on a JRPG after just playing the first game and never make it to the second game. So that would be something that I'd keep an eye on. But don't worry, any game on the wish list, I would definitely look at the same factors again, just to make sure things haven't changed. And the 4th game there is oddly not listed. What happened there? I hit the wrong keystroke. Let's see. This is August Generations of War. This is August Generations of War 0. This is August Generations of War 2. So this one I can click on, but it's not going to load. It's just going to say waiting for cache forever because I've exhausted all of the cache room, memory. Next we have Alice in Wonderland Hidden Objects, which this is a hidden object game. I've at this point given up on all hidden object games, particularly bad hidden object games. This one is only 50% positive and came out in 2018, and it has only 10 reviews. I do kind of feel like if I was a bigger YouTuber in general, having a game with Alice in Wonderland in the name to cover might get me a few more views, but that's a lot of ifs, quite frankly, and paying even $1.99 to play a bad game just because it has name recognition is not a good move, particularly since I actually have covered a Disney Alice in Wonderland game, and it didn't really get me any views anyways, so I would just be compounding that mistake to leave that on the wish list. Next we have Alone Together, which is below the 20% 20 review rating, but it is 100% positive. This is a VR game that looks like it's a platformer puzzler for kids. It looks interesting. It is also kind of niche, so I feel like maybe the question kind of boils down to, am I ready to get rid of all the VR games on my follow list and stop considering VR games at all? Or should my follow list have about 10 or 20 games just in case I do get a VR headset at some point and could record that and could review it? I think this game in particular is by a unheard of developer and self-publisher. It does look like it's a hidden gem, and for that reason I will just leave this one on the wish list. Well, not the wish list, but the follow list. I get the two confused, and so I'm not going to change anything there. Next we have Altered Cosmos. Now, I found this art style unique, and unique is very appealing when you see a lot of the same old asset flip games on Steam. That being said, this is one that I'm going to have to roll the dice on. It's a point-and-click adventure game. I'm a sucker for point-and-click adventure games and have quite a lot of them on my wish list. It's $5.99, which means it is both a little more expensive than it probably should be and a little too cheap than it probably should be, because I could make an argument that it's too cheap, it's not going to be a good game, it's not going to be that long, or I could argue it's too expensive for what is obviously going to be a super short game. It's in English and Polish, which means it might have a different perspective in its storytelling, and it might explain the artwork. And of course, we can't get the reviews to load. So, this is a game I think I'm willing to roll the dice on. Probably wouldn't take too long, even if it was a bad game, and a bad point-and-click adventure is not the worst game in the world to play. The worst game would be a bad JRPG, because that would take incredibly long amounts of time. So moving on. Next we have American Fugitive. Now I put this on the follow list when it first came out and it had no reviews. This is an example of a game that did get mainstream coverage, and it seems like everybody is liking it for what it is. So it is 76% positive. It's been out only a couple days. It's from a known publisher, Curve Digital. It is what GTA 1 or 2 would be if GTA 1 or 2 was made in 2019. You're running around robbing and stealing things and acting like a fugitive, carjacking, things like that. It is somewhat high at $15.99, and I'm not going to beat around the bush. I don't know if I really would want to play this game, just personally. I'm not sure I really want to play the GTA games. That's why I plan to play Bully before I play any of the other GTA games, because it's a lot to play the bad guy the whole time, particularly as a gamer who mostly plays the good guy. So that being said, there's really no reason not to put this on the wish list and reconsider it. It'll probably be a good long amount of time before its price got down to a point where I'd actually consider it, though. It would have to be probably 50% off at least. Get it down to $6 or $5. It's probably like a $5 game to me, just because it's not the kind of game I'd want to play. Moving on, we have Ancient Tower, which is a tower defense game, and if there's one category of games I definitely don't want, it is tower defense games. So, even though Ancient Tower looks like it has a little bit more going up for it on the screenshots, from what I can tell here, and man, we are just having a rough time. Apologies for this, but yeah, I don't see a reason why this would stay on the wish list. This should go. We don't need to play any tower defense games ever. Next we have Ancient Warlords Equilibrium. I don't know how you pronounce that. It's a card game, and because I play Hearthstone, try to keep my eye on collectible card games or trading card games or deck building card games. It seems like this might have been one of these games that I was considering. At $9.99, you can look over here and see if it has any in-app purchase. It doesn't seem like this game is particularly of any popularity, and so a card game falls apart at that point. It's also a single player only game, so yeah, you'd basically spend $10 to get this, have to learn the rules, play it through maybe 20 to 100 levels, and then you'd be done, and there'd be no reason to do that. So yeah, Ancient Warlords as a card game doesn't cut the mustard. Quite frankly, almost every VR game, every card game, sorry, probably isn't going to cut the mustard. I've been very, very lenient on putting card games on the follow list to see if maybe they gather some popularity. But while I would be interested in seeing a replacement to Hearthstone, the only other real option right now is Magic: The Gathering Arena, and quite frankly, it takes more time to play a game of Magic than it does to play Hearthstone, and I'm looking for something that would take less time, not more time. Next, we have a game called Angry Birds VR Isle of Pigs, and it's a VR game. I think Angry Birds still has relevancy. It is, give it 3 to 4 more years, maybe then Angry Birds won't be remembered so well, but this was rated 86% positive. It takes, I assume, the general idea of Angry Birds and puts it in your hands with VR controls. From the screenshot, that seems to be exactly what it is. $14.99. It's not an incredible large amount of games, a lot of price for a VR game. Now, it is worth mentioning, almost all VR games boil down to you're standing in one place and you're shooting something, or you're standing in one place and you're throwing things. And when you get reductionist like that and look at the games, it's like, oh yeah, this is the exact same thing over and over again. I would say Angry Birds falls right into that category, standing in one place shooting at things. but it works very well because that's what Angry Birds has always been. It is flying birds towards buildings and knocking them down with physics. So this works. This should be something that stays on the follow list. So I'm just gonna close that tab. Next we have Angry Punisher, which came out January of 2019. I shouldn't be considering this game, quite frankly, because I haven't given it a full 6 months. That being said, it has only 3 reviews, so I don't think it's going to get any more in the next few, in another month or so. Why I picked 6 months? Because that is the time frame that people are interested in their game selling. So they push with advertising and review copies and such to get their game's name out in the news in that first 6 months. Sometimes they're really only interested in the first 6 weeks of sales, but by 6 months, either you're putting out DLC to bring your game back into the news for a second cycle, or you've just failed to gain any traction as far as getting your game noticed, unless of course your game is super successful like Fortnite, where it's just going to go on and on for a while. And yes, it's taking so long to get through just the A's that we will have to take a break after A, and I guess we'll just do a recording for every letter of the alphabet. Maybe we'll squish some alphabets together. Probably when we go through T's, that will take a ridiculously long amount of times, because there's quite a lot of games that start with T. Yeah, this should just be removed from the wish list. We don't need to get any further from it. The general concept where you're running around in what is as an executioner and executing people to get like combos. It's kind of an interesting idea as I'm looking at the screenshots, but it's not enough. There are 3 main quests on each level for you to accomplish. The levels get larger and harder as you try to punish and save lives. It's like, okay. So yeah, there's nothing here that caught people's attention. Next we have Anubis Challenge, an action-based adventure VR game. Let's see. There is something, I guess, to be said about being in VR and standing in one place and fighting mummies or Anubis creatures instead of fighting the zombies, but that's really the only difference. Otherwise, this is just a wave-based fighting VR game where waves of enemies are going to come towards you, and you're going to try and shoot them or hack and slash them or kill them with whatever weapons you can find. So, for this VR game, it is 100% positive of 10 reviews, but then you go into the problem of it's not unbelievable that a game developer got 10 of their employees or friends to review a game positively. That's why I usually only consider things if they have over 20 reviews. So 19 people tell me something's good, I don't want to believe them. 20 people tell me something's good, I do want to believe them. It's an arbitrary number, I know, but it's just a number I picked out of the air. That being said, I don't see any reason to put this on the follow list. If I am going to get a VR headset at some point, I don't want to play these kinds of games where it's just going to be wave-based combat. So that's something that should go. Whereas Apollo 11 VR HD is a VR game that also has a non-VR mode. It is rated very positively, and there's really no reason not to get this, even if you don't have VR, because you can still play it. Let's see. Over here. If you don't want to play the game elements, you can sit back and relax. The original experience with new demo options allowing you to pick and choose which sections to play. Available for arcades on Springboard VR. Let's see. Apollo 11 VR HD. Well, maybe this does still require VR. I'm trying to read this and make sure. This is kind of more of an educational game than a entertainment game. Not that I'm against educational games. I thought this was one of the games that didn't require VR because it doesn't have the red bar. Apollo 11 HD doesn't require VR. If you buy Apollo 11 VR HD, then it does require. So this is all on one page, basically, but you'd have to be careful which one you're buying. And you'd think they would label that better, but they're not. So it's educational. I guess at that point the question would be, why would I cover it, as it's an educational thing, and it's not really a game. I'll put this on the wish list, but it quite frankly is getting put on the wish list for just to support educational software more than I'd actually buy it and cover it. That was kind of a harder decision. Most of these decisions have been pretty easy. Next we have Arca's Path VR, trapped in an enchanted simulated world of Arca. It's up to you to find your path to the labyrinth and break free. So it seems to me like it is a puzzle adventure game. This is in VR. That being said, is this a hidden gem that should stay on the wish list? Or is this a game that just has no relevancy? I think this game is trying something different and showing something different with its art style and with its thumbnail, and it's assumedly this is the main character. So I would leave this as a hidden gem and leave this on the wish list, the follow list. So that's what I'll do. Very possible. Again, never get a VR headset, never cover that game. Even if I did get a VR headset, I'd probably come back and investigate it further. But quite frankly, if we can get the follow list to half its size, that's a great amount of progress, because we are looking at basically every game that has come out on Steam that maybe I wanted to follow or put on the wish list. Next we have Anniversary Collection Arcade Classics, first non-VR game in a while. It's 8 arcade classic games. You can see they're 65% positive. This is because it's from Konami, and Konami does not care about making video games, and they're just selling their old games. It, frankly, is a matter of your own personal opinion and morals at this point, whether you would want to buy and officially own an old Konami game, because any money you put into this, the $19.99 you put into this, is not going into the pockets of anybody who developed these games. Definitely, It's just going into the pockets of a company that doesn't even develop games anymore. So there will be no new Metal Gear Solid because you're buying some old game from Konami. There will be no new Konami game at all developed off the profits of this. So at that point, if you're not really helping the original creators of the game, and you're not really helping society in general with the game, I don't blame people for just then thinking, well, why not just go get the ROMs for these games if you want to play them? And arguably, I would say that these games, in particular, you would have to have probably been Japanese to even recognize most of these shoot 'em up games. Shoot 'em ups being shooters where you're flying upward. So you see people don't like it. You see the price is extremely high for what it is. And here's the lineup: Scramble, Twin Bee, Nemesis, also known as Gradius, Salamander, also known as Life Force, Typhoon, also known as Ajax. Some of these games certainly would have been in arcades when I was a kid, but they probably weren't very popular even then. Haunted Castle, Vulcan Ventures, also known as Gradius 2, and Thunder Cross. If you purchase it in Japan, you get the Japanese version. If you make it in other regions, you get the English version, which is a kick in the pants, certainly. Why not just allow them to load in the English or Japanese version via menu option, or just different load options in general? Because if you are a fan of old arcade games, you probably know the difference and know which version you want. So yeah, for me, I don't see any relevant reason why you would want to cover this or have this, so I'm just gonna leave this to be removed from the wish list, the follow list. Next we have Arivolto 7 Coins, which is a hidden object game. Hidden object games in particular have a tendency to look pretty good. Often they'll have a video that loads that makes it look like the game is very animated and has a lot of video content in it, but in reality almost every hidden object game barely has any video in it and very little interaction. A lot of hidden object games don't label themselves as hidden object games, and instead they label themselves as adventure games, but they make themselves pretty obvious that they are hidden object games when you will see a screen that has a list of objects you're supposed to find, and if you see that screen even once, that, by my book, makes it a hidden object game. Hidden object games also are often really, really expensive, and this one is only $3.99. If the publisher is Big Fish Games, which is a website that sells hidden object games, they often sell collector's editions of hidden object games that really aren't probably collector's editions for $13.99. It's not atypical to see hidden object games sell for $10.99, which is asking quite a lot considering you're only going to spend a couple hours on it, and unless you are obsessed with hidden object games, you're either then going to never play another hidden object game, or you're going to buy another one because they have no replayability. There's no reason why this should make it to the wish list. I probably put it on the fall list simply because it was cheap. I've tried to cover several hidden object games. So here's the tab suspended page, and I think this isn't going to work. So we're going to have to skip Arizona Sunshine just because the cache is so used up. I can tell you though that I do know Arizona Sunshine is a AAA VR zombie shooting game, so it wasn't going to leave the follow list anyways, so we'll just leave it at that. I'm hoping after we break up for the A recording that I can take a break and have that close all of the tabs, and then use that to my advantage to then refresh and get some of this web pages working better. So screenshots would hopefully start working. But staying logged in so that I could just click the button to say stop following it or add it to the wish list is still going to probably be impossible. Next, we have a point-and-click adventure game called Archangel, the House of the Seven Stars. 81% positive at 16 reviews. This came out in July of 2018. It's a point-and-click adventure game. It's a horror game. I am still definitely a sucker for point-and-click adventure games. So, yeah. I think we're cool. You got a 64-bit Windows executable. I don't know why it would need that, but and they're kickstarting a new game from this developer, Winter Night Games. I misread that. Freudian slipped, I guess. There. Yep, this is good. Good enough for point-and-click adventure to make it to the follow list, the wish list. Always saying the wrong thing. Next we have Ashi Lake of Light, which is kind of more of a simulation of it's a minimalistic puzzle game where you're floating candles. This is something they would do in Japan, and it really has no connection to I think pretty much anywhere else. It is 100% positive at 19 user reviews. So it's only one short. It's $3.99. It is a unique game, certainly. Looks like there's a fly that flies around the lanterns and changes color and turns on or turns off the lanterns. Is the puzzle of it. More than 70 puzzles, which is a decent number, certainly. Yeah, this is a good seller. This is one that has no reason not to be on the wish list. I imagine when I first put it on the follow list, it just did not have any reviews. And this is kind of the perfect example of what we're looking for in a game. Something that is niche, something that might be a hidden gem, something that maybe won't take a long time to do. 70 puzzles probably isn't going to equal 70 hours of gameplay. And almost certainly this is a kind of game that as a YouTuber I could cover, and there would be very few other people, relatively speaking, who have covered it. So, yeah. Moving on. Next we have a game called Astral. It's a psychological horror platformer. It's rated mostly positive. Some of these games, it's just no question. Yeah, they got the reviews, and compared to so many other games, if you have over 20 reviews and they're positive, I would just put it on the follow list and or on the wish list. And this is a game that totally deserves to be on the wish list. It meets that goal of being mostly positive and having over 20 reviews, and that's really all that it takes. Also, it kind of has to look interesting to me. There's definitely a lot of instances of games that come out brand new when I'm looking at them, and probably within a week they would also meet that standard. But since I just don't know, I don't know. And there, on the other hand, have been lots of instances where AAA games have come out, and either the PC or the Steam version in particular has problems, and it's negatively reviewed compared to the console versions, or there's some other element that in it that people don't like. Mortal Kombat 11 is a great example of that. A lot of people unhappy with how that game felt in its playing and its grinding. A lot of people unhappy with the DLC and costumes in it and the price, and unhappy with several other things not worth mentioning at the moment. So if I had just assumed that Mortal Kombat 11, because it's a big name, recognizable name, AAA game, was deserving of the wish list, then I'd have to go back to the wish list and filter it out and remove it. Next we have this game, Atelier Lulula, the Scion of Arland. The Atelier series is a JRPG series. I'm, again, still trying to bend my head around which JRPG series are worth playing and which aren't. This is a more female protagonist in at least this version. This is the fourth of the Arland series, according to the description. I'll also tell you that this screenshot, the original art from which this thumbnail is made, there is a horse over here at an angle, and the screenshot shows her skirt and her legs. And when this screenshot was used to make the Switch version, you saw the horse and the skirt and the legs, and then when, for really no good reason, when the PlayStation version of this shot came out, they cropped it to not show the skirt, not show the legs, and not show the horse. This has been cropped even more and turned at an angle to fit Steam. I doubt for any censorship reason, and more just for what I could only describe as just sizing reasons. I don't believe this series is particularly, well, we could say lewd or full of cheesecake. I don't think there's even a mature rating on it. Let's see if we can get down here. Yes, it is teen, not even teen plus, fantasy violence, mild language, mild suggestive themes, and use of alcohol. So that's all this is. So actually, as a JRPG series, this would be great to cover on YouTube, because you're fairly certain it's family friendly. This game is $59.99. It's a AAA Japanese game, JRPG. But then again, also I have to decide, would I want to play this, the lesser known, more niche JRPG, or would I want to play the Final Fantasy 13 or 13-2 or 13 Lightning Returns? A lot of it is probably going to come down to grinding more than anything. I would like to find one that has very little grinding, or an easy way to get around that, just for time management reasons. Next, we have a game called Atavel. It's a fun and interesting 3D puzzle game, cubes, lasers, and teddy bears. Now, Portal is one of my favorite games. Portal 1, Portal 2, and so sometimes I will try to grab or find a Portal-like puzzle game that's a clone. A lot of developers did try to clone it and do similar things. It's pretty easy to pull that off, because you can certainly very easily go to the Unity store and buy enough tile assets to make a tiled room, and buy a cube, and buy a laser, and buy similar art assets. I'm not 100% sure that these are pre-bought art assets, but it would be pretty easy to do. So what this is really going to come down to is do I roll the dice on this? It's $9.99. Let's see. It says it has over 80 puzzles. There's no mainline narrative. No need to talk to a guy A to pick up key X to unlock Y. No blocking puzzles. No pressure. No punishment. Multiple solutions. Relaxing music. So it seems like it would be like there's just going to be a big facility. You can go anywhere. You can solve any puzzles. When you solve the puzzles, you're really not going to get anything. They're selling it as a selling point that there's no story to distract you, no linear puzzles, no timers, no pressure. The best part of Portal, though, was its story. But yeah, I could see a small-time developer not being able to write a good story. And frankly, I've played games where they've had story crammed into them, and then the story's not that good anyways. So yeah, I think this $10 game, if it got on a Steam sale, if it's less than $5, would be a fine consideration. So I'm willing to roll the dice on Adavail. Perhaps if I played it and found it to be lacking in quality, I'd write a review on it myself. Or, you know what, when it actually went on sale, I'd go back and look at the reviews just to make sure it's not 4 very negative reviews. Because they won't even give you a score until you have at least 10. Let's see. Next we have a game called Ari's Tales. 3D adventure to meet the king and queen of Solia. Jump and explore, solve puzzles, help friendly characters, open the doors to the castle. This came out in December. It's been in early access for 6 months. Says it's a dad and mom making the game, and that probably means that they're not ever going to finish it. It's, you know, a side project that they don't have the time to or the funding to put their effort into it. I think I'm gonna wait and let the early access games sit around for another 6 months, maybe even another year before I kick them off the follow list. But going forward, early access games don't get put on the follow list. I wait until they actually have a release date, and that release date has passed and the game has actually been released. Because quite frankly, if Steam just went through its entire list of games and said, we're removing everything that doesn't have a release date that has passed that release date. So everything that said it was coming out before now that hasn't come out by now, just remove all of those games. They could probably lose a couple thousand games instantly and clean up their store that way. But yeah, there's still a lot of people trying to do early access. Although I will applaud gamers in general that they've pretty much given up on playing any new early access game, and they don't want to hear anything about an early access game. Things like Anthem having come out and shown themselves as major failures, or Fallout 76 that's showing itself as a huge failure. Yeah, people don't want to see early access at all, even from small developers where early access made sense. It never really made sense that a AAA publisher or developer was using the description early access. That's just, we didn't want to pay people to finish the game, even though we could. We should be close to the end here. Next we have Awake Definitive Edition, and there's another buzzword. I wouldn't be surprised if there is no non-definitive edition, or there's a game called Awake on some website somewhere as like a flash game. It's a point-and-click adventure. Seems like it's grayscale, and I don't hate grayscale in black and white games. It's just not very visually attractive. Can you find a way to prevent this terrible crime and put the murderers to justice? So it's $2.99. It's not asking much. It was made from an Adventure Jam in 2016, as if that is a good reason. And so now it's being sold as a definitive edition. Game jams usually only take 48 hours. They only last that long, so if you're making a game in 48 hours, I wouldn't be surprised if there's not much here, and thus the price. But you know what? I think that it deserves to be on the wish list. Again, if this was on sale during a summer sale, I'm not sure a game like this would ever go on sale, but if it was down to 99 cents or even $1.99, that's not asking a lot for a short experience. And I do want to play shorter games. I'd much prefer to play more short games than a lot of longer games where there's just fewer that I could play. I don't want to get to the point where I'm playing only 5 or 6 games in a year. Let's see. That being said, now you have this problem of that previous game was called Awake and came out in 2019, and then we have this game called Awake Episode 1, which is a VR headset game for $77.99. It came out in December 5th, 77% positive. I think this is full motion video too, at least in part, from these screenshots looking down here. Yep. Well, it's a VR game, so it stays on the follow list. I don't see a reason why it should leave the follow list. And here we have Away Journey to the Unexpected. And this is, in all of the A's, this is really the only game that has come out as mostly negative. 22 reviews, 31% saying it's positive. And let's not even care if possibly it's getting review bombed because, let's say, the developers did something to irritate people, or the publishers did something to irritate people. This game is $16.99. I like this thumbnail. I like this art. And if I could show the screenshots, I think I'd like the screenshots too. But it must either play really bad, or there must be some other reason. And it really is just mob rule at this point. So, even though I can't read the reviews, mob rule wins. This game should be removed from the follow list. If something changes, I'm not blocking the game. There's a third button to block it, but I've only blocked about 12 games, and that's from 100% from developers that threaten to DMCA YouTubers. So that's pretty much the only way you could get blacklisted or blocked by me. So yeah, this game just leaves the follow list. Mob rule says it's bad. And that leaves us here with our first B game, backgammon, chess, and checkers. And this looked like this would have been a good game, but it's only gotten one review, and it's a VR game, but you can play without VR. It doesn't have any relevancy is the problem, and it's just too simplistic. I don't think it probably even has much logic as far as actually playing backgammon, chess, and checkers. So yeah, even though we've moved into the B's now, that's also going to be removed from the wish list. Well, the follow list. So that's going to be it for this stream and this recording. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment and watch every second of my videos. We'll start right here at the next recording. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, which is a great way to get notifications, because YouTube hates to give you notifications if you don't click that bell, and even if you do click the bell, you don't get notifications sometimes. But yeah, follow me on social media sites. There's a bunch of links down below. If you want to support me even further, there's a link to Patreon, which would be greatly appreciated. Or you could friend me on Steam and get me a game off the wish list, which is what we're trying to keep tidy by doing all of this, is putting only the best games on the wish list. We don't want to run into a scenario where somebody buys me a game that I said I wanted and then I really don't want to play it, so I never cover it, because that's rude. Or you could gift a gift card. If there is just a game you'd like to see me play and you're going to gift it to me, that's still perfectly fine, but you're then accepting that extra small bit of risk. Remember, the Steam Summer Sale is coming up, so this will be a good time to start getting things set up for your own purchases during the summer sale, or to friend me and make sure you're following along. Yep, that's it though. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.